I moved into Maple Ridge Apartments last June, carrying everything I owned in 2 suitcases and a box of dishes that still smelled faintly of the old place. Smoke, bleach, and someone else's perfume. The hallway upstairs was narrow, light bulbs humming and thick glass covers that hadn't been cleaned in years. The carpet sank underfoot like damp moss. I remember thinking the whole building felt waterlogged, as if it had been left out in the rain too long. Lydia, the manager, jingled a ring of keys that looked older than she was. "You're in 3A, she said, pointing to the very end. "Only one neighbor." She lowered her voice as though sharing gossip with a stranger she didn't trust. 3B, Mr. Crow, keeps to himself." The name hung there, heavy and sour. I nodded, pretending not to notice the way her eyes flicked to the wall between the 2 doors before she turned and walked away without saying goodbye. Inside 3A, the air was stale, the kind that sticks to your throat. Sunlight leaked through crooked blinds, striping the walls like old scars. I unpacked slowly, telling myself the silence was peaceful, not lonely. At 3 that morning, I learned the difference. A long scrape shuddered through the wall, wood on wood, chair legs across a bare floor. Then another, then nothing. I lay still, counting my heartbeat until it slowed. Old building, I thought. Pipes, maybe. The next day, I asked Lydia if 3B had hardwood. She blinked too quickly. "I don't remember," she said. "Mr. Crow doesn't like people asking questions." That night, the scraping came again, joined by a sound like humming. Low, tuneless, broken. It wavered on one note until my teeth ached. I pressed my ear to the plaster. The vibration trembled through it like a living thing. And then, clear as breath, my name. I jerked back so hard I hit the bed frame. No one knew me here. I hadn't even given Lydia my first name, just initials on the lease. The humming stopped. Silence expanded until it felt like pressure on my chest. Morning brought a note under my door. "Sorry about the noise. I'll be quieter tonight." No signature. The paper smelled faintly metallic, like coins held too long in a sweaty hand. I almost laughed. A neighbor with manners, that was all. But at 2:17 a.m., 3 slow knocks traveled through the wall, measured, patient, followed by a single laugh that broke halfway through its breath. I didn't sleep again. By daylight, I convinced myself to call the landlord. The line clicked and crackled. Lydia's voice came through thin and distant. "Mr. Crow," she repeated. "He passed away in April, stroke. That unit's been empty ever since." The phone slid from my hand. I heard her still talking, asking if I was there. But the sound behind the wall had already started again, slow rhythmic tapping like fingers searching for the right spot. For the next week, I tried everything. Headphones, white noise apps, sleeping pills. It only got worse. Some nights I woke to faint music, something old and warbled, seeping through the plaster. Other nights I heard footsteps pacing, always stopping when I moved. Once I smelled rain though the windows were closed, followed by the warm metallic tang that made me think of blood drying in sunlight. On Friday I found another note. "You hear it too." I threw it away, but later I noticed the handwriting was identical to my own. That evening the power flickered. The television stuttered through channels until it settled on static. Behind the hiss, a voice whispered the same phrase again and again, each time closer. "You left the door unlocked." I checked. It wasn't. I even pushed the couch against it. Still, the whisper laughed softly, like someone amused by a child's effort. I dreamed that night of a chair facing a wall, of hands resting calmly on its arms, of a man with no mouth humming through his throat. When I woke, the smell of metal filled the room, and warm moisture traced a line down the baseboard. I pressed my finger to it. It pulsed. The following day, I found Lydia outside sweeping cigarette butts into the gutter. She looked older in daylight, skin gray beneath her makeup. "I need to move," I told her. "There's something in the next apartment." She shook her head slowly. 3B? "Yes. That's where you live," she said. I stared at her. "No, I'm 3A. She frowned, pulling a clipboard from under her arm. 3A's the storage unit. Been that way for years. I left her standing there and ran upstairs. The brass number on my door, tarnished and crooked, read 3B. Inside, the humming started again, as if it had been waiting for me to notice. I shouted until my voice cracked. The hum rose to match it, louder, warmer, until the wall seemed to breathe with me. I slammed my hands against it. It pushed back once, gently. That night, I found a cassette recorder on my kitchen counter. I hadn't owned one in years. The play button was already pressed. My own voice whispered from the speaker. I'm already inside. I don't remember dropping it. The tape kept spinning long after it went silent. I packed what I could and went for the door, but the hallway was gone. Only the wall remained, stretching endlessly forward. I turned around. My apartment had rearranged itself, one chair facing the wall. A faint draft breathed through a new crack in the plaster, carrying the smell of rain and rust. Something on the other side began to hum the tune again, low, tuneless, broken. I sat. I listened. When the building superintendent finally opened 3B months later, they found dust, one chair, and a cassette still turning. The tape hissed, catching the last bit of sound, a human voice humming softly, waiting for the next breath. The tape ends, but the hum doesn't. It slides out of the speaker, thick as breath, and curls under the door. I sit there listening to it fade down the hall until it becomes part of the building's own pulse. When I finally move, the air feels heavier, as if someone else is breathing through me. Days pass, or maybe it's only one day stretched too long. The lights flicker in slow rhythm with the hum behind the wall. I keep telling myself I'll leave when the sun rises, but the blinds never open properly. The slats stay shut no matter how hard I pull, letting in only a thin orange dusk that never changes. I start writing letters to no one. Dear whoever finds this, there's a man in the wall and I think he remembers being me. I tear them up before I finish. The sound of paper shredding is the only proof I can still control something. A knock comes from inside the vent. 3 times I whisper back, "What do you want?" The answer seeps through like warmth through cloth. To stay. That night I hear footsteps in the hallway. I open the door to tell whoever it is to stop, but the hall is empty except for wet footprints leading toward my unit. They stop at my threshold, turn, and disappear into the wall. When I press my palm against the plaster, it feels slick. I pull back. A faint outline of my own hand remains, darker than paint, pulsing once before fading. Sleep becomes impossible. The hum grows louder until it replaces my heartbeat. I stop eating, stop counting hours. Every time I blink, the room shifts an inch closer to the shape of the one I saw in my dream. Bare walls, single chair, no doors. On the 7th day, or the same day looping again, the smell of metal thickens until I gag. I follow it to the bathroom. Water runs even though the tap is off. The drain trembles. When I kneel, I hear the hum echoing up through the pipes. I whisper, "Mr. Crow?" The water answers with my own voice, distorted by the gurgle. "You came back." The mirror fogs, though the air is cold. In the condensation, words appear slowly, one letter at a time. "Your turn." I stumble backward. The light above the mirror flickers, then steadies on a deeper orange, the color of old blood under varnish. A faint reflection remains when I leave the room. Me, still standing there, lips moving to a tune I can't hear. The humming follows me into the kitchen, softer now, coaxing. My body feels borrowed, my thoughts like echoes returning too late. I reach for the recorder still lying on the counter. The play button sticks halfway, then clicks down by itself. A new voice fills the room, warmer than before, layered beneath the hum. It's quieter when we share. Something inside the wall scratches as if agreeing. Plaster dust falls across my arm, gritty and cold. Beneath the white powder, my skin looks gray. I push the chair against the wall, unable to stop myself. Sit. Lean forward until my ear touches the paint. The surface yields a little, soft as breath. The humming shifts pitch, matching the rhythm of my pulse. I say, "I'm here." The wall says, "So am I." It's almost peaceful. Outside, somewhere beyond this floor, someone knocks 3 times. A distant voice calls a name I once used to answer to. I can't tell if it's Lydia or the new tenant. It doesn't matter. The sound barely reaches through the thickening hum. I wonder what she'll think when she moves in. When she hears the scraping, the low broken tune at 3 a.m. Maybe she'll press her ear to the wall like I did. Maybe she'll find a note that smells faintly of metal. "Sorry about the noise." I can feel him smiling now, or maybe it's me. The difference has thinned to nothing. The lamp flickers once, twice, syncing with the breath that passes between the walls. My last clear thought slides away as easily as the air leaving my lungs. Every night at 3 I hum the same tune back. Because when I stop, he starts again, and he's getting louder. The first thing I noticed about Unit 5B was the smell. Not bad exactly, just old. Damp carpet. Cigarettes that had burned down to their filters and left behind ghosts in the wallpaper. The kind of smell that seeps into your clothes so you carry it out with you, like a secret you didn't agree to keep. It was quiet, though. That's what mattered. After months of living downtown above a bar that never slept, the silence felt almost holy. The walls were thin, sure, but I could live with that. You tell yourself every apartment has a trade-off. Space for quiet, quiet for safety, safety for rent you can afford. The woman next door introduced herself my first night. She knocked softly, 3 times, barely audible. And when I opened the door, she was standing there barefoot, wrapped in a robe that looked older than the building. "Mara," she said. Her voice rasped, like she hadn't used it in a while. She smiled, small and tired. Glad to finally have company. Her eyes were gray, the kind that always look like they've seen the end of something. I smiled back, because what else do you do? "I'm Claire." "Good to meet you, Claire," she said, and the corners of her mouth twitched like it was harder to smile than it should have been. "I've been here a long time." Then she turned and disappeared into her apartment. I didn't see her again. Not in the hallway, not at the mailboxes, not at all. But I heard her. It started the 3rd night, around midnight, faint through the wall that separated our living rooms. At first it sounded like someone talking on the phone. A woman's voice, low, steady, sometimes laughing softly, sometimes breaking into quiet sobs. I figured Mara had friends she talked to late, or maybe she was just one of those people who thinks better out loud. But after a few nights, I realized I never heard another voice. Just hers. One night I pressed my ear against the wall. Her voice was clear now, sharp even through the plaster. She was whispering, words running together in a strange rhythm, like a prayer or a confession. Then she said my name. Once. Soft. Then again. And again. Over and over until the syllables stopped sounding like words and started sounding like breath. I pulled away from the wall, heart pounding. It could have been coincidence. She might have been saying something that sounded like my name. Or maybe I was overtired. Still, I didn't sleep much that night. The next day, I kept telling myself not to make it weird. People mumble in their sleep. People talk to themselves. By the next week, I was used to her voice. If you can get used to something like that, it became background noise, a strange kind of comfort, a reminder that I wasn't alone, even when I wanted to be. Then the tone changed. The laughter stopped. The crying grew sharper, wet and broken. Some nights she didn't talk at all. She just made a sound like someone dragging their fingers along wallpaper, slow and steady. I started leaving the radio on low just to drown her out. When that didn't help, I bought earplugs. They dulled everything except the one thing I didn't want to hear. Her voice, clear, intimate, like it was right beside me. Claire. I sat on the couch holding my breath. The whisper came again. "I hear you." I turned the radio up until the dial cracked under my fingers. The next morning, I caught the landlord in the hall, a short man with a comb-over that never quite hid the truth. I told him about the noise. "She's just lonely," he said. "Old tenants get that way." "She's not old," I said. "She's 30, maybe 40. He frowned. "Mara, no one's lived in 5A since Christmas." I laughed automatically, waiting for the punchline that didn't come. He shrugged. "The place is empty. I locked it myself." My stomach turned. Then who? He raised a hand. Old pipes, thin walls. You'll hear echoes. Happens all the time. That night I sealed every crack in the wall with tape, around outlets, along the baseboard, even around the vent. Anything that might let sound through. At 12:03 a.m., the voice returned, muffled, desperate, not whispering anymore. Crying, "Help me." I pressed my hands to my ears. The sound only grew louder, not through the wall this time, but inside the room, right behind the couch. I turned slowly. A faint draft brushed my neck, cold and damp. I moved the couch and saw it, a hole in the wall, a perfect circle, drilled clean through plaster, about the size of an eye. I crouched, shining my phone light through. Darkness, then movement. An eye stared back at me, wide, still, watching. I screamed and stumbled backward. For a moment everything was silent except my own breathing. Then a voice slipped through the hole, familiar but wrong. It was my own voice. "Don't close the hole. I like hearing you too." I called the landlord again at sunrise, told him I needed the unit next door checked. He sighed, said he'd come by later. He didn't. That evening, I pushed furniture against the wall, everything heavy I could move. The sound didn't stop. The whispers came from every direction now, through the vent, under the floor, behind the light switch. I left my apartment for the first time in days and spent the night in my car. When I came back the next morning, the hole was gone. Someone, or something, had patched it. The plaster was smooth, too smooth, a different color than the rest of the wall. I should have felt relieved. Instead, the silence felt heavier. That night, I didn't hear her at all. No whispers, no laughter. Just the faint hum of the refrigerator and the creak of settling wood. Until 3 a.m., when the air vent rattled once. I stared at it from the couch, frozen. Then, faintly, through the ductwork, came breathing. Slow, wet, close. I covered the vent with a towel, taped it tight. It didn't help. The breathing turned into humming, a tune I recognized. Something I'd hummed to myself while unpacking weeks ago. I lay awake until morning, staring at the patched spot on the wall. The paint was darker now, like it was damp from the inside. When I touched it, it felt warm, like skin. By morning, the wall had cooled. The mark where I'd pressed my palm was still visible, though, faint, like a bruise that wasn't mine. I told myself I'd imagined the warmth. Sleep deprivation can do that. I called the landlord again, but the call went straight to voicemail. My message came out half coherent. Something about holes and voices and someone breathing through the vents. When I hung up, I realized I was shaking so badly I'd dropped my coffee. That evening, I sat on the couch, phone in my hand, staring at the wall. The patch circle looked smoother than ever, the paint now matching perfectly. Whoever fixed it had been inside while I was gone. At 11:55, the lights flickered. At 12:03, the whisper started again. It came from inside the wall. The exact spot of the patch. Soft at first, just breath. Then words. "It's lonely in here." I pressed my hands against the plaster. It felt cold again, pulsing slightly beneath my palms, like something moving behind it. "You shouldn't have left me alone," the voice said. I stumbled back, heart pounding, and grabbed my keys. I was halfway to the door when I heard something new. Fingernails scraping, slow, deliberate, from inside the wall. I froze. A single crack appeared across the patch, a thin, dark line running from ceiling to floor. The sound stopped. Then softly, the whisper came again. "Let me see you." I backed away, hitting the edge of the kitchen counter. A glass fell and shattered, but the noise barely registered. The crack in the wall widened with a dry pop, and something pressed through from the other side, pale and trembling. Fingertips. I screamed, but no sound came out. The fingers curled and scraped against the surface, dragging downward, leaving streaks of something dark and wet. "Don't shut me out," the voice whispered. I ran into the bedroom and slammed the door. My hands shook as I shoved the dresser in front of it. I could still hear the scratching moving from the living room to the hallway now, closer, dragging itself along the baseboards. Then silence. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered without thinking. On the other end, my own voice said, "Claire, can you hear me?" I threw the phone. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor, screen cracked but still glowing. My voice kept speaking from it, calm and rhythmic, repeating the same question over and over. "Can you hear me?" The lights flickered again. The bulb over the dresser popped. The room went dark. In the dim flash of the dying light, I saw the closet door shift open an inch. The voice whispered from inside, closer now, not muffled at all. "I can hear you." I pressed my back against the far wall, tears burning down my cheeks. The air was colder in the corners, heavy with the smell of damp plaster and something metallic. The whisper grew louder. "It's better when we talk together." The closet door opened wider, slow, creaking. From the darkness inside, a faint light glowed, pale blue-gray like moonlight filtered through fog. And then I saw her. Mara, or what was left of her. She was folded into the space, her body half buried in the wall behind the closet, like she'd been absorbed by it. Her skin was the color of plaster, her eyes dull and glassy. The light wasn't around her. It was inside her, flickering beneath the surface like a heartbeat. She smiled. "You listened?" she said. Her mouth didn't move with the words. They came from everywhere. The vents, the walls, the phone still glowing on the floor. I couldn't breathe. She reached out one hand, and the wall around the closet rippled like water. "Come closer," she whispered. "You already know how." I shook my head, whispering no over and over, backing toward the door. But the door was gone. Just seamless wall where it had been, smooth and pale. The light in Mara's chest pulsed faster. "Talk to me, Claire." I turned and ran to the window. The night outside looked wrong, the street too still, the buildings across the alley sagging inward like reflections in water. Behind me, the wall bulged. Something pressed out from inside. Two hands, a face forming under the paint, lips parting, whispering my name in a perfect imitation of my own voice. "Don't run. Stay." I grabbed the nearest thing, a chair, and slammed it against the wall. The plaster cracked, flakes falling like snow. The voice screamed high and distorted, then cut off abruptly. I stumbled back, panting, staring at the hole I'd made. Nothing moved. The apartment was silent except for the slow drip of something from the crack. Thick, red, and wet. I left everything behind and ran. I didn't stop until I was 3 blocks away, standing barefoot in the street. The sky was gray with dawn. When I looked back at the building, every window on the 5th floor was glowing faintly from within. Later that day, I went back with a maintenance worker to grab the rest of my things. The apartment door was open when we arrived. The air inside was dry and still, the smell of dampness gone. But the wall where the crack had been was pristine, freshly painted, smooth. The worker frowned. "They already repaired it?" I nodded weakly. When I walked closer, I saw something faint beneath the new paint, a shape pressed just under the surface, an outline, a face. My face. That night I checked into a motel 2 towns over. I told myself I'd never go back, never think about 5B again. But at midnight, just as I was starting to drift off, the wall behind the motel bed made a faint, familiar sound. A single knock, then a whisper. "I found you." I sat up, frozen. The air smelled of damp plaster again, and then softly, my own voice spoke through the darkness. "Don't close the wall, I like hearing you too." I moved into the building because it was quiet. That was the only thing I wanted then. Quiet. The kind that presses against your skin until it feels like a weight. The brick was old, red faded to brown, the windows thick with grime that filtered the daylight into a dull amber. The smell of the hallway, dust, coffee, something faintly metallic, reminded me of a church basement. My apartment was small but warm enough. Second floor, a single window looking out over the narrow alley that ran between buildings like a forgotten vein. The ad had said second floor available. When I signed the lease, the landlord, Mr. Halpern, smiled too long, that polite landlord smile that says, "I know something you don't." "You'll like it here," he said. "Everyone keeps to themselves." Everyone. I didn't think to ask if that included the woman upstairs. The first night, I unpacked to the rhythm of pipes ticking and floorboards sighing. Around midnight I heard her. Soft steps above me, slow and uneven. Then the drag of something heavy across the floor. I smiled. Old buildings talk. People move furniture. Life has noise. But the sound didn't stop. The same pacing, the same drag, the same pause. Over and over, like a loop. I lay in bed counting each step. 12 across, pause, 12 back. It went on until 3 in the morning. When I woke, sunlight slipped through the blinds, and everything looked ordinary. I made coffee, stood at the window. The building opposite had a fire escape that went nowhere, ending just below the roofline. There was laundry hanging there, frozen in place, fluttering without wind. That afternoon I saw Mr. Halpern in the courtyard, sweeping leaves into a pile that never seemed to grow smaller. I asked about the woman upstairs. "Oh," he said, pausing. "You hear her already?" "She keeps late hours," I said, trying to sound casual. He chuckled but didn't look up. "You'll get used to the old noises." That was all. That night, the pacing began again. I lay on my back staring at the ceiling, watching the faint vibration of the overhead light fixture with each step. 12 forward, 12 back. Then a pause. Then the sound of something heavy sliding across the floor, slow, deliberate, as if whatever she was moving fought her for each inch. The smell of damp wood filled the room. I told myself it was plumbing, wind, imagination. By the third night, the rhythm had changed. Footsteps first, then a low sound. Not quite crying, not quite humming. It was the kind of sound someone makes when they think no one can hear. I sat up, my chest tight. The sound moved above me, to the corner of the ceiling directly over my bed. It was crying, muffled, trembling. I almost went upstairs. Then came a heavy thud. Something dropped, hard enough to shake dust loose from my ceiling. I froze, heart in my throat. Silence followed, long and absolute. The next morning, I found Mr. Halpern locking the front door. "Is everything all right with the tenant upstairs?" I asked. He looked genuinely confused. "There's no tenant upstairs, not since last winter." I laughed, because that's what you do when something feels wrong. "You must mean another unit." He shook his head. "Top floor's been sealed off. Roof leaks, bad wiring. I can show you." He led me up the narrow stairwell that smelled like rust and rain. The door at the top was padlocked, heavy and new. "No one's up there," he said. "You'll sleep better if you stop thinking otherwise." I nodded, but his words didn't settle. That night, the crying returned. Louder now, closer. It sounded like it came through the ceiling. I stood on my bed, knocked 3 times. The crying stopped. Then a whisper. "Thank you for hearing me." I stepped back so fast I nearly fell. The next morning, the padlock was gone, and muddy footprints trailed down the stairwell toward my door. I told myself I dreamed it. That's easier than believing you live under something that shouldn't exist. Days blurred together. The sound of pacing became part of the air. The pipes groaned when she moved. The light above my bed swayed as if pulled by her weight. Once, while showering, I felt a drop of water from the ceiling. I looked up. A hairline crack ran across the plaster, dark and wet. When I touched it, The water tasted like rust. That night I taped my ceiling with black paper, thinking if I couldn't see it move, maybe I could pretend it didn't. At 12:07 a.m., the paper shifted. One sheet at a time, peeling itself free until I saw the faint outline of something pressed against the ceiling from above. A hand, 5 pale shapes dragging slowly across. The sound came again, the soft crying, followed by a low voice, as if speaking through fabric. "You hear me?" I didn't sleep at all after that. The next day, I tried to leave. I packed 2 bags, went down to the main door, but it was stuck, swollen by humidity, or maybe something else. Through the crack beneath it, I could see the shadow of Mr. Halpern's shoes. I called his name. No answer. When I knelt to look, the shadow didn't move, but the air smelled wrong, like wet plaster and something sweet. When I finally got the door open, the hall outside was empty. I ran down the steps to the street, breath clouding in the cold air. But the moment I crossed the threshold, the quiet hit me like a wall. No cars, no wind, no sound at all. The world outside the building was frozen, still, gray, unmoving, not dead exactly. Paused. I stepped back inside. The door closed itself behind me. The humming began again. The humming threaded through the walls like a pulse. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It found its way into every corner of the apartment, a low vibration that turned the air thick enough to taste. I tried playing music, turning on the TV, anything to drown it out. The sound just bent itself around the noise, slipping under the dialogue and between the notes, humming in harmony with whatever I put on. By 2 in the morning, I gave up. I sat at the kitchen table, the light flickering every few seconds, and wrote a note to myself. "You are awake. You are alone. There is no one upstairs." I left it on the fridge where I'd see it in the morning, but when morning came, the note was gone. In its place was another scrap of paper, same handwriting, same ink. "Thank you for hearing me." I tore it up and threw it away, but the pieces didn't look right in the trash. They looked old, as if they'd been sitting there for years. That evening, I made myself go up to the 3rd floor. The door that had been padlocked now hung slightly open. The smell hit me first. Damp, mold, something sour beneath it. A long hallway stretched out beyond, lined with peeling wallpaper the color of bone. The floor was covered in mud. Footprints led from the door toward the apartment directly above mine. I followed them, the boards creaking under my weight. The door at the end was half shut. Inside, the air was colder. A faint light came through the window, enough to see dust suspended like snow. There was nothing inside but a single wooden chair, and above it the ceiling was broken open, splintered lath and hanging plaster, a jagged hole that looked down into my own bedroom. I could see my bed through it. My blankets were still in the shape of my body. I stepped backward, breath catching in my throat. The floor under me moaned like it had lungs. From somewhere behind, a soft sob broke the silence. I turned. In the corner stood a woman, hair hanging over her face, her dress gray with age and damp. She was looking down, arms wrapped tight around her stomach. She said very softly, "It hurts." Her voice wasn't angry. It was small, human. I tried to speak, to ask if she was all right, but the words stuck. She took one step forward and the air folded in on itself. The smell of metal filled my mouth. When I blinked, she was gone. Only the sound remained, her footsteps moving overhead again above my bed, the rhythm I'd come to know too well. I stumbled downstairs. Every wall in my apartment seemed to breathe. The ceiling bulged slightly with each step she took above it. I called the police. They came, they checked. No one upstairs, no footprints, no sign of anyone ever having been there. They left, politely confused. I sat on the bed for hours after, waiting for the sound to start again. It didn't. The silence was worse. Then, just before dawn, a soft rustling. A photograph slid under my door. A picture of me, asleep. The angle was wrong. It was taken from above. I stared until the sun came up. Then I packed everything and left the building without locking the door. For 2 nights I stayed in a motel across town. No pacing, no humming. Just the hum of the vending machine outside my window. On the 3rd night I woke to the sound of someone walking above me. Slow, steady, dragging. I turned off the lamp. The ceiling was thin, just drywall and silence between me and whatever moved up there. Then the crying started, muffled, trembling. I sat up, knocked once on the ceiling. The crying stopped. Then a whisper, soft enough to make the air in the room shift. "Thank you for hearing me." The hum of the vending machine flickered out. The ceiling above me creaked. Dust fell across my blanket, warm to the touch like breath. I looked up. The shape of a hand pressed through the drywall, fingers spreading slowly, pushing downward until I could see each joint. I tried to move but couldn't. The hand retreated. The crying came from behind my head now, inside the wall. I whispered, "Please stop." The crying stopped. Then my own voice, quiet, uncertain, echoed back, "Okay." Now every night I hear her pacing again, but it's not from above anymore. The sound starts in the corner of the room and circles the bed once, twice, each pass a little closer. When I close my eyes, I can feel her breath on my face, warm and damp, smelling faintly of dust and rust. Sometimes she hums, a low tune with no melody. Sometimes she whispers my name. I've learned not to answer. But last night, she whispered something else, something that wasn't my name. She said, "Your turn." The air went still. Now, when I breathe, the walls breathe back. The ceiling trembles with each heartbeat. And just before dawn, when the world should start to wake, I hear her voice again, closer than it's ever been, right above my head. The first thing I noticed about Riverside Court wasn't the silence. It was the smell. Old carpet, rust, a sweetness that didn't belong there, like fruit left too long on a windowsill. The landlord met me in the hallway with a half smile that didn't touch his eyes. "Cheap rent, quiet neighbors, no questions," he'd said. That last part stuck with me. The building was small, only 4 apartments on each floor. Mine was 2A. Across the hall, 2B. The door was shut, the peephole stuffed with tissue, a strip of light barely leaking from underneath. The air in the hallway always felt warmer by that door. I never saw the tenant, but I heard him. Small noises at first, glass clinking, something heavy sliding over the floor. Once a faint hum, a tune I couldn't place, and the smell. It started sweet, like honey or rotting peaches, then turned sour, then metallic. The kind of smell that settles on your tongue before you even breathe it in. I told myself it was plumbing, or garbage, anything ordinary. Until one night, I woke to a sound, a wet drip, steady and slow. It was coming from the ceiling above my bed. When I reached up, my fingers came away sticky, warm. The smell hit harder, thicker. It made my eyes water. Something between rust and decay. I sat there for a full minute before I could move. Finally, I got up, dragged the chair from the kitchen and climbed onto it. The light bulb buzzed overhead as I leaned close to the ceiling. The plaster was darker in one spot, soft to the touch. I pressed, and a drop fell, landing on my wrist. Red. I stumbled back, heart pounding, wiped it away, and stared up as another drop gathered, heavier this time, before falling. I grabbed the broom and banged on the ceiling. No answer. Then, faintly, through the wall, humming, low, calm, like a lullaby. I banged again, harder. The humming stopped. Silence. Then 3 slow knocks from the other side of the wall. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. By morning, the stain on the ceiling had spread. I called the landlord. He showed up an hour later, sleeves rolled up, eyes half-lidded like he hadn't slept. "It's the pipes," he said after one glance. "Rust, maybe mold, happens every summer." "It's not rust," I said. "It's wet." He gave me a tired smile. "I'll have maintenance look at it." He didn't write anything down. After he left, the humming started again. That afternoon, I saw the maintenance guy in the hallway, a big man in overalls, smelling like bleach and cigarettes. "2A?" he asked. "Yeah." "Complaints about smell?" I nodded. He sighed. "Been getting those for weeks. Probably from 2B. Guy in there never opens a window, keeps to himself. Don't worry, we'll handle it." That night, the smell got worse. I taped towels under the door and around the vent, but it didn't help. The air itself felt thick, heavy. I opened the window, leaned out for fresh air, and that's when I noticed something strange. The window of 2B was open too. No lights on inside. Just darkness. But I could hear it. That humming again, drifting out into the night. I whispered, "Hello?" The humming stopped. Then, soft as breath, "You shouldn't be listening." I stumbled backward, tripped on the rug, and slammed the window shut. The sound didn't come again that night, but the smell stayed. Sweet, rotting, almost human. The next morning I found something new. A small brown stain spreading down my wall, starting near the ceiling corner, right where it met the shared wall with 2B. When I leaned closer, I saw the faint outline of moisture seeping through. I touched it, then jerked back. It was warm. I called the landlord again. No answer. I left a voicemail, angry, rambling, then sat in the kitchen with a towel over my mouth to block the smell. It didn't work. By evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I stepped into the hallway. The air was worse out there, almost tangible. The door to 2B looked swollen, the wood dark around the edges, as if it had been wet for days. I pressed my ear against it. Silence. Then a single sound. A low, slow click, like a jar lid twisting open. I backed away. The next morning, a heavy knock shook my door. When I opened it, the maintenance man was standing there. His face looked pale beneath the fluorescent light. "Need you to stay in your apartment," he said. "We're checking 2B. Been too many complaints." He didn't wait for an answer. I followed anyway. He shoved a crowbar into the doorframe of 2B, pushing hard until the wood cracked and gave. The smell that hit us was like a wall. Thick, wet, sweet, and wrong. He gagged, covered his nose with his sleeve. "Jesus," he muttered. "What the hell?" The light flickered as we stepped inside. The walls were damp, streaked black with something that glistened in the light. The floor sagged, warped from moisture. In the center of the room stood a chair, facing the door. On it sat a man, or what had been one. He was still upright, head tilted slightly, skin gray and shiny like wax left too close to heat. His eyes were open. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The maintenance man stumbled backward, knocking over a table. Glass jars rolled across the floor, some shattering, releasing a thicker, sharper version of the same smell. Inside them, dark, congealed liquid. Something floating. He grabbed my arm. "Out. Now." We ran into the hall. I bent over, coughing, the air burning my throat. He called the landlord from his radio. No answer. We waited. Minutes passed. Finally, he said, "Stay here," and went downstairs. I didn't stay. I walked to the door of 2B again. It was open, swinging slightly, the air inside shifting with each movement. The humming had started again, soft, from deeper inside. I took one step over the threshold. The smell was unbearable now, sweet and rotting and metallic all at once. The light bulb above the chair flickered, buzzing. The man's head moved, just slightly. A twitch. His mouth opened. And from somewhere in the walls, faint and steady, came the sound of dripping. I stumbled back into the hall and slammed the door shut. The humming stopped. When I looked down, something had seeped out from under the door. Dark. Red. I ran. I didn't stop running until I reached the stairwell. I leaned against the banister, breathing through my sleeve, but the air there was no better. Every breath carried that same cloying sweetness. It coated my tongue, filled my throat. I wanted to scream, to leave, but my legs wouldn't move. Somewhere below, the maintenance man shouted my name. Then nothing. Just the hum of the lights overhead, and that slow, steady drip echoing up through the building's hollow bones. When I finally made it outside, the night air felt thin, too cold. I doubled over and threw up on the sidewalk. A woman walking her dog crossed the street without looking at me. I slept in my car until dawn. By the time I worked up the nerve to go back inside, the hallway smelled of bleach and metal polish. Yellow tape fluttered over the door of 2B, and a plastic sheet covered half the ceiling above my bed. Someone had handled it, but the smell never left. No matter how many candles I burned, it always crept back, faint at first, then heavier, thicker, until it lived in the walls. That afternoon the landlord came by. His shirt was freshly ironed, eyes bloodshot. "Everything's fine now," he said. "Just some plumbing corrosion." I asked what happened to the tenant. He blinked once, slow. "There was no tenant." I laughed, but it came out dry. "I saw him. In the chair." His smile didn't change. "You should get some rest. These old places, sometimes they hold smells." He left the key on my counter and walked out. I stood there for a long time. The silence felt heavier than the smell. That night I dreamed of jars, hundreds of them, lined along a wall, each one filled with something dark and moving. When I woke, the apartment was hot. The vent above the stove rattled softly, like someone breathing inside it. I climbed onto the counter, unscrewed the grate, and peered in. Nothing. Just blackness. I tapped the edge of the metal. It echoed back too quickly, as if the space inside was smaller than it should have been. Then faintly, a click. I froze. Another click. Like a lid twisting open. The smell poured out, stronger than ever, sickly sweet and electric, like meat left under a heat lamp. I shoved the grate back on and stumbled down, covering my mouth. At 2 a.m. I woke again. The dripping had returned, softer this time, coming from the vent. Drip, drip, drip. I couldn't stand it. I grabbed a flashlight and went into the hallway. The door to 2B was open. No tape, no sheet, just darkness yawning inside. "Hello?" I whispered. The flashlight flickered. Inside, the chair was gone. The jars were gone. The walls were clean, repainted, and on the floor, a wet patch shaped like footprints leading toward the shared wall. My wall. The humming started again. Low, familiar. I backed away until my shoulders hit the opposite wall. The humming grew louder, clearer, forming words that didn't make sense until they did. It was my name. I ran back to my apartment, slammed the door, locked it, shoved a chair beneath the handle. The humming didn't stop. It came through the wall, steady, calm. Then, from inside the vent, click. I turned the flashlight on it. Something shimmered behind the grate. Wet, moving. A hand, pale, trembling. Fingertips dragging slow lines through the dust. My breath caught. The hand matched mine. Same ring, same scar across the knuckle. Then it curled inward, gripping the edge of the vent. The humming paused. A whisper slid out, soft and wet. "You left me." The flashlight died. For a moment, there was nothing. No sound but the hiss of the air through the ductwork. Then the grate fell open. I didn't see what came through, only felt the rush of hot, sweet air against my face. I must have blacked out. When I woke, the apartment was bright with morning light. Everything looked normal. The grate was screwed back in place, spotless, except the smell. It was stronger than ever, coating every inch of the air. I went to the door, grabbed the knob. It turned, but the door wouldn't open. Something sticky held it shut. I looked down. A thin smear of dark red had seeped out from the baseboard, curling toward my feet. And somewhere behind the wall, the humming started again. Two voices now, blending perfectly. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text. See you downstairs. I dropped the phone. The smell grew sweet again. Then the dripping began, not from the vent this time, but from the ceiling right above me. Warm, steady, rhythmic. I didn't look up, I didn't have to. I could feel it. Thick drops landing on my shoulder, sliding down my arm, and from the vent, that voice, no longer whispering, but singing. A slow, wet lullaby that ended with a breath not my own. I moved into apartment 2A because it was quiet. After the breakup, I wanted walls that didn't echo someone else's voice, nights that didn't sound like traffic or laughter spilling from bars I used to go to. Brookmere Street was the kind of place that went still after sunset. No music, no sirens, no neighbors shouting through the drywall. The building was old enough to creak when you looked at it. 2 floors stacked over a sunken basement no one talked about. The air smelled faintly of dust and old varnish. My downstairs neighbor lived in 1A. Or at least, that's what the mail slot said. I never saw him. Not once. But I heard him. The first week it started as small sounds. A chair moving, the dull thump of something dropped, pipes humming underfoot. I told myself it was normal. Old buildings move. Then the pattern began. Every night around 2 a.m., a single thud, followed by dragging, then silence. Always the same order, always the same rhythm. At first I thought it was furniture. Maybe he worked night shifts and rearranged things when he got home. But the sound wasn't right. It was too slow, too heavy, like something being pulled 1 inch at a time. It rattled the glasses in my kitchen. One night, curiosity won. I went downstairs, barefoot, the wooden steps cold under my feet. I stopped outside 1A. The door looked swollen from moisture. Its paint cracked like dry skin. I knocked. Once. Nothing. Then, just as I turned to go, a voice whispered from the other side. Come back later. The words barely reached me, as though spoken through cloth. I froze, heart hammering. My mouth felt dry. I wanted to ask when later, but didn't. Instead, I went back upstairs trying to convince myself I'd heard a television. The next night, the noise came earlier, 1:45 this time. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, counting each thud, drag, silence, over and over, like breathing. Then came the smell. Metallic, sweet, wet. I sat up, the taste of copper filling my throat. The sound below stopped. Then footsteps began to climb the stairs. Slow, careful. The wooden boards beneath my hallway groaned. I turned off the light, crouched beside the door and listened. The steps stopped outside my apartment. Silence. A faint scraping followed, like fingernails brushing the underside of the door. I didn't move until dawn. When I finally opened the door, nothing waited on the other side. Only a folded piece of paper slipped under the crack. Sorry about the noise. You shouldn't have listened. The handwriting trembled like it had been written by a hand too weak to hold the pen steady. I called the landlord. He answered on the second ring, voice thick with sleep. There's someone in 1A, I said. They're making noise all night, leaving notes. He sighed. No one's in 1A. Then who? That unit flooded 2 years ago. We sealed it off. Can't rent it again. Too much damage under the floor. I sat in silence. Are you sure you're not hearing the pipes? He asked gently. Old buildings talk. I'm sure, I said. But he'd already hung up. That night I checked the door to 1A myself. A thick layer of dust covered the knob. When I touched it, the metal felt damp and cold, as if something behind it breathed moisture through the cracks. I leaned close, listening. Nothing. No hum, no movement. Just silence deep enough to feel like pressure. I went back upstairs. At 2:11 a.m., the noise returned, but it wasn't below anymore. It was in the walls. A faint scraping moving horizontally now, tracing the outline of my living room from inside the plaster. When I pressed my ear to the wall, the sound stopped. For a moment, I thought I heard breathing. Then, so faint it could have been imagination, 2 knocks from inside the wall. I knocked back. Twice. The second I did, something knocked again. Closer this time. I didn't sleep that night either. By morning, I noticed damp spots spreading across the floorboards. When I knelt to touch one, the wood was soft, like skin left too long in water. I told myself I'd call the landlord again, maybe get out of the lease early. But I didn't. Some part of me wanted to know what was underneath. That evening, I sat on the floor above the spot where the noise usually started, flashlight in hand, phone recording. At 1:50, the thudding began, soft, rhythmic, deliberate. Each impact sent a faint vibration through the boards. The smell came next, metal and mold, then dragging, long, wet, steady. I whispered into the dark, "Who are you?" No answer, just another thud. I tapped the floor once with the flashlight handle. Something tapped back. Once, then twice. Then silence. When I checked the recording later, I expected to hear static. Instead, I heard my own voice asking the question, followed by something beneath the floor whispering back a single word. Hungry. I deleted the file. The next morning, a maintenance worker came to check the pipes. He was young, nervous, whistled as he worked. After a few minutes, he frowned and pointed at the ceiling of 1A through the open vent shaft. "You got water damage again," he said. "But that's not from a leak. Looks like something's seeping up." He shivered. "Smells like the flood never left." When he was gone, I sat in the silence he left behind, waiting for night to fall. At dusk, I heard movement downstairs again. Not the dragging this time, but the faint rhythm of someone pacing. The boards beneath my feet trembled as if following the same path. Then 3 knocks. I knocked back once just to see. The answer came instantly. 2 knocks. Faster this time, like excitement. I stepped back, heart pounding. The smell of wet earth filled the room. I turned on every light, but the brightness only made the shadows darker at the edges. From somewhere beneath, the dragging began again. Louder now, closer. Something was coming up. The dragging stopped directly under me. The air thickened until it felt hard to swallow. I crouched, pressing my palm to the floorboards. The wood was wet, and something beneath it moved. A slow push upward, like breath under skin. I backed away until my shoulders hit the wall. The light flickered once, twice, and then steadied again, dimmer than before. From below came a creak. Then another. Footsteps. Someone, something, was walking around beneath the floor. I whispered, "Stop." The sound paused, as if listening. Then, in answer, 3 sharp knocks. I clapped my hands over my mouth to keep from making a noise. The smell of metal filled the room. I turned and ran to the front door. The handle slipped in my hand. The door wouldn't budge. It was as if humidity had sealed it to the frame. The footsteps changed direction. They were under the hallway now, coming toward the stairs. I could hear the faint rasp of something wet brushing against the underside of the boards. The sound moved slowly, deliberately, like a hand feeling its way toward me. Then silence. I leaned forward, listening. The quiet stretched so long that for a moment I thought it had ended. That whatever haunted this place had decided to rest. Then came a sound so soft it barely existed. A nail scratching against the wood directly below me. Once. Twice. I stepped back. A crack appeared in the floor, a thin dark line running between the planks. Water beaded up through it, glistening in the weak light. It wasn't water. It was red. I stumbled back, heart hammering until my legs hit the couch. The crack widened with a splintering groan, and from it rose a smell that turned my stomach, copper and mud, and something sour. I ran to the bedroom, slammed the door, shoved the dresser against it. The thudding started again, louder now, vibrating through the walls, shaking dust from the ceiling. Then, silence. I waited, counted to 60, then another 60. Nothing. I tried to calm myself, telling my brain what it needed to hear. Old wood, bad plumbing, trapped air. Then the closet door creaked open, just a few inches. Enough to see the darkness inside shift, like breath caught behind fabric. I took a step forward, every nerve screaming against it. The floor under my feet was soft, spongy. I could feel moisture seeping through my socks. A smell hit me, rot and iron. And from inside the closet, a low voice whispered, "You shouldn't have listened." I dropped the flashlight. It rolled under the bed, the beam cutting wild shapes across the walls. The floor dipped beneath me as if something underneath had just rolled over. Then, from inside the closet, a wet dragging sound began again, muffled by the floorboards. I pulled the dresser away and ran into the hallway. The apartment felt smaller, the air heavier. Each light flickered as I passed. I could hear the dragging keeping pace with me, following beneath the boards, turning whenever I turned. At the front door, I threw my shoulder against it. The frame groaned but didn't give. A faint sound joined the dragging now. Breathing, slow, wet, too close. When I turned back toward the living room, I saw it. The floor had split open where I'd been standing. A dark, wet hole yawned between the boards, maybe 3 feet across, edges lined with splinters and damp earth. From inside came a faint red glow. Not light exactly, but movement. Something shifting deep below like water reflecting fire. And over that glow, a hand reached up. Long fingers, skin bloated and pale, veins black like cracks in porcelain. It pressed against the edge of the hole, nails scraping. Another hand followed. Then an arm, elbow twisting wrong, pulling. The smell hit harder. Mud, rust, something ancient. I wanted to run, but my body wouldn't listen. I could only watch as it hauled itself upward, a head emerging next, hair slicked flat against gray skin, eyes blank and open. It looked like a man who had drowned long ago and somehow remembered the way back. He dragged himself up to the floor, water spilling from his mouth. His voice came out broken, full of air. "You were above me." He took another step. Each one made the wood bend and creak, water rising in his footprints. I was below. I couldn't speak, could barely breathe. He smiled, or tried to, lips splitting where they stuck together. "You heard me." He reached out a hand and I stumbled backward. My heel hit the edge of the rug, and I fell hard, the air leaving my lungs in a single gasp. When I opened my eyes again, he was closer. I crawled backward, desperate, until my back hit the wall. He crouched in front of me, dripping, head cocked like he was studying a reflection. His voice came out softer now. "Too quiet up here." The lights flickered, and for an instant the room went completely dark. When they came back, he was gone. Only the wet prints remained, leading from the hole to the closet. The door was open again. From inside, 2 faint knocks. I crawled forward on trembling hands, staring at the prints. They stopped right at the edge of the closet, then vanished into the floorboards. I whispered, "Please stop." The answer came as a whisper from below. "Your turn." The boards under my knees shifted. The cracks widened. Cold air rushed up, bringing with it that same metallic smell. I lunged for the door again, threw my weight against it until it finally gave. The hall outside was silent. I didn't stop running until I was in the street, barefoot, shaking, the night air burning my lungs. Through the upstairs window, I saw my apartment light flicker. Then, faintly, I heard the thudding start again. Drag. Silence. Drag. Silence. From the sidewalk, I could see water dripping from the underside of the building, forming a dark puddle that spread across the concrete. I stayed in a motel that night. The wallpaper smelled like cigarettes and mildew, but it was dry and quiet. At least it was at first, as at around 2 a.m. something tapped the pipes in the wall. Once, then twice. A low, slow thud followed, deep enough to vibrate the bed frame. I held my breath, The sound came again, closer this time, rising through the floor like a heartbeat. I whispered to the dark, "No." But the pipes answered anyway, the rhythm matching my pulse. When I finally looked down, water was seeping out from under the bathroom door, creeping across the tile toward me. I could smell the same damp earth, the same iron taste. Then came the last sound. 2 knocks from beneath the bed, soft, patient, and in the silence that followed, I heard it again, dragging. Only now it wasn't below, it was moving beside me, slow, steady, like something remembering how to breathe. The house had been empty for 6 months when I moved in. It smelled like damp wood and old wallpaper, a smell that felt like memory, thick, trapped, reluctant to leave. The windows rattled when trucks passed on the road, and the kitchen tiles never warmed even in sunlight. I told myself that was what I wanted, a house with no history that cared who lived in it. The landlord had met me at dusk. He was thin, shoulders bowed like someone protecting himself from invisible rain. "It's old," he'd said, jangling the keys. "Basement's locked. Not part of the lease." That door caught my eye the first night. Gray paint, rusted handle, a single bolt above the knob. When I leaned close, I thought I smelled metal and earth, the way a graveyard smells after rain. I tried to laugh it off. Divorce had left me jumpy. I heard ghosts in every silence. My only neighbor was Mr. Avery, a man I saw but never met. He lived next door in a house that mirrored mine. Same porch, same cracked siding. Every evening I'd glimpse him through the window, standing perfectly still behind thin curtains, face hidden in shadow. Sometimes he raised a hand in greeting, though it never looked like a wave, more a test to see if I'd respond. For a while, life settled into the quiet I'd wanted. Mornings with coffee on the porch, afternoons cleaning corners that stayed dusty no matter how many times I swept. Nights with the hum of the refrigerator filling the house like a small heartbeat, until the power went out. It was around 10 on a Sunday. Everything died at once. The fridge, the hum, the soft light of the street lamp. The entire street fell black except for Mr. Avery's house. His windows glowed a dull orange, as if something burned slow inside. I stepped outside with my flashlight. The air was wet and heavy, the kind that keeps sound close. That's when I noticed my basement door was open just a crack, wide enough for a draft to sigh through. The beam of my flashlight trembled on the edge of the door frame. "Mr. Avery?" I called. "Did you lose power too?" No answer, only a faint scraping sound rising from the dark below, metal against wood, slow and patient. The smell that came with it made my stomach turn. Wet soil, rust, something sweet underneath, like fruit starting to rot. I closed the door, turned the bolt, shoved a chair against it. At 2:11 a.m., the sound returned. Footsteps on the basement stairs, soft at first, then heavier, closer. The wood creaked beneath them as if it had been waiting years to remember that sound. I whispered to myself that it was pipes, that old houses groan, that fear is just imagination doing overtime. But the chair against the door trembled once, as though nudged from the other side. The footsteps stopped. I stayed awake until dawn. When light finally came, I found muddy prints on the kitchen floor leading from the basement door to the front door, stopping there like a trail waiting to continue. A note was taped above the knob. "Don't worry. I closed it for you." The handwriting was neat, deliberate. The paper smelled faintly of earth. I went next door. No one answered. Mr. Avery's curtains were drawn tight, the glow gone. That afternoon I called the landlord. His voice sounded tired, distracted. "There's someone in the basement," I said. He exhaled long into the receiver. "No one's supposed to be down there." "Then why was the door unlocked?" "Maybe the lock slipped. I'll check this weekend." He didn't. That night the wind changed. The whole house felt like it inhaled and forgot how to exhale. I sat on the floor beside the couch, listening. Somewhere beneath me, wood creaked in slow rhythm, too even to be random. I turned on every light. They flickered once, twice, and steadied. At 2:11, the bulbs dimmed again. I heard the first step groan, then another. By the fifth, the sound was right beneath where I sat. Something brushed the underside of the floor, gentle, deliberate. The boards flexed under my palm. When silence returned, I realized I'd been holding my breath so long my vision swam. In the morning, I walked to the window. Mr. Avery stood in his, same place as always, curtain half drawn. I lifted my hand in greeting. He mirrored me. But there was something wrong with the movement. Too stiff, too slow, as if someone were guiding his arm from behind. Later, while cleaning, I found a hair snagged in the basement door hinge. Coarse, gray, damp. The same smell of dirt clung to it. I wrapped it in tissue and threw it away. It was back on the counter an hour later. That evening I watched television with the volume low. A faint hum seeped from the vents, a tune without melody. My name threaded through it once, almost too quiet to hear. I turned the TV off. The hum stayed. Through the window, Mr. Avery's house was dark again. I told myself to stop looking. But when I did glance up, I saw him, or someone, standing behind the glass. Tall, shoulders wrong, as though the bones had forgotten their shape. I dropped the blinds and left them that way. Sleep didn't come. At 2:11, a whisper rose from the floorboards, barely audible, like a sigh escaping from deep underground. It said something I couldn't understand. Then the smell returned, metal and soil, thick enough to taste. I pressed my ear to the wall and heard it clearly this time. Humming. The same broken tune from the vent, the same rhythm as the footsteps. I whispered into the dark, "What do you want?" The humming stopped. Then, soft and close to the baseboard, a single word, home. I jerked back. The light bulb above me flared white, then died. When I opened my eyes to the dark, the outline of the basement door glowed faintly, edges breathing red as if lit from behind. The faint red glow pulsed once like a heartbeat, and vanished. I didn't move for what felt like an hour. I sat in the dark, fingers pressed against my knees, trying not to breathe too loudly, as though sound might wake something waiting below. When morning finally scraped through the blinds, I went straight to the basement door. The bolt was still turned, the chair still wedged under the knob, but the floor in front of it was damp. I knelt, touched the puddle. Mud, cold and thick, smelling of copper and roots. I told myself I'd imagined it. Fear has texture when you live alone. It fills gaps that ordinary life can't. By afternoon, I couldn't stay inside. I walked the length of the street just to prove the world was still moving. Neighbors raked leaves. Kids kicked a ball down the pavement. No one seemed to notice the house beside mine, blinds drawn, quiet as breath held too long. When I returned, the sun was sinking. In the orange light, I could see a shape behind the basement window. Just a shadow, but it moved when I moved. I called the landlord again. "You said that door wasn't part of the lease," I said. "What's behind it?" A pause. Then softly, "You really don't want to open it." "Why?" His sigh crackled through the line. "It's better if you think of it as support. Some parts of these old houses are hollow." The phone went dead. That night I sat on the floor again, back to the couch, flashlight on my lap. Every few minutes the bulb flickered. The hum returned through the vents, slow, tuneless, patient. At 2:11 the house went silent. Not quiet, empty. Even the wind stopped. The first creak came from below. Then another, steps climbing one at a time. I aimed the flashlight toward the basement door. The beam trembled over the frame. The bolt slid upward by itself, smooth as a breath. The chair scraped aside. The door opened a few inches. Cold air spilled out, smelling of soil and something faintly electric. I whispered, "Mr. Avery." The darkness didn't answer, but something moved just out of sight, heavy and wet. The door opened wider. The flashlight died. I ran to the kitchen, heart hammering, grabbed the only thing that could serve as a weapon, a rusted hammer from the drawer, and turned back. The basement door was closed again. Nothing moved. The hum had shifted. It was coming from the walls now, crawling through the pipes surrounding me. Beneath it, a whisper that almost sounded kind. "It's your house now." I didn't sleep. At sunrise, I drove into town, found an old hardware store, bought a padlock and 3 meters of chain. The clerk joked about ghosts in old basements. I didn't laugh. When I returned, I chained the door shut, loop after loop until my hands blistered. For the first time in days, the air felt still. I made coffee, sat by the window. Across the yard, Mr. Avery's curtains moved. His face appeared between them, pale in the daylight. He smiled. I tried to wave, but the window pane was cracked from the inside, the fracture cutting straight across where his eyes should have been. That night the chain rattled once, twice. Then the humming stopped entirely. Silence filled the house like water rising. I almost felt relief, until the smell returned, stronger now, sharp as blood. When I turned, the floor behind the couch bulged upward, boards warping as though something pushed from underneath. I backed toward the door, hands shaking. The board split with a groan, releasing a breath of wet earth. Something pale pressed through the crack, fingers, long and soft, curling for grip. I bolted for the exit. The front door refused to open. The knob turned freely in my hand, but the door wouldn't move, as if the air itself held it shut. Behind me, wood snapped. The smell of soil filled my lungs. When I turned, the hand was gone. Only a smear of mud across the floor, trailing toward the basement door. I followed it, heart thudding against my ribs, unable to stop myself. The chain was still there, stretched tight, links humming under tension. Then, one link at a time, it began to uncoil. The bolt slid free. The door opened outward, not inward, like it had been waiting for me all along. I leaned over the threshold, flashlight trembling in my grip. The stairs descended into black. The smell of dirt was overwhelming. At the bottom, something glimmered faintly, metallic, round. I took one step down, then another. The boards moaned. Halfway down, the light caught on glass. Jars, dozens of them stacked on shelves. Inside each jar floated something pale and shapeless, curled like wet cloth. The humming started again, deeper now, coming from beneath the floor. I heard the whisper once more. Home. Then I saw him. Mr. Avery. Standing at the far end of the basement, face half lit by the weak beam. His eyes were open but dull, skin gray and stretched. Dirt clung to his clothes, heavy and wet. He smiled the same wrong smile I'd seen through his window. "You kept it clean," he said. His voice came from the walls, not his mouth. My throat closed. "You're dead." He tilted his head as if thinking. "Not anymore." The humming became a roar. The jars rattled, lids popping one by one, air hissing out like breath held too long. He stepped toward me. The earth around his feet moved with him, rising like water around ankles. I turned and ran up the stairs. Something grabbed my leg, cold and slick, but I kicked free, slammed the door, threw the chain back through the handle. From the other side came 3 knocks, then silence. I collapsed on the kitchen floor, gasping. The walls pulsed faintly, a heartbeat slow and steady. At dawn, I packed a bag and left. I drove until the sun disappeared behind me, until the road names changed and the map no longer mattered. That was 2 weeks ago. I'm writing this from a motel outside of town. The wallpaper peels, the air smells of mildew, but at least it's quiet, except when it isn't. Last night at 2:11, the lights flickered. The heater coughed once, then hummed. A low, broken tune I recognized. I opened the closet this morning and found a patch of dirt on the carpet, small but damp. The air here smells like home. He's been quiet tonight. but I can still smell the dirt. The first thing that drew me to Briarwood Towers was the view. You could see the whole city from there, all the way down to the river where the streetlights broke on the water like candlelight. It looked peaceful, distant, something you could live above and not inside. I moved in at the end of August. The air smelled like hot concrete and rain, and the elevator groaned each time it climbed. The hallway was narrow, painted beige that had turned the color of old teeth. My place, 4B, was small but bright in the day. I told myself it was enough. I didn't want neighbors. I'd had too many of those in the last place, arguments through thin walls, television laughter leaking into my sleep. I swore that this time I'd keep to myself. For the first week, I didn't hear a sound from anyone else on the floor. No footsteps, no doors closing, no plumbing. Just the faint hum of the building itself. Then, at 3:12 a.m. on a Thursday, came the light. At first, I thought it was the red dot of a smoke alarm, a flicker bleeding through the frosted glass of 4C across the hall. I stared at it for a moment before going back to bed. But when it happened again the next night, the light pulsed, slow, deliberate. I stood by my peephole watching the hallway. The glow from under the door was alive, rising and dimming in rhythm, like a heartbeat trying to find its pace. I counted, every 6 seconds. By the third night, I couldn't sleep. I told myself to ignore it, that people leave things plugged in, that red isn't always danger. Still, I found myself staring at the crack under the door until the light faded around dawn. During the day, the hall looked dead. Dust lined the baseboards and the brass numbers on the doors had gone green around the edges. I asked the superintendent about it when I caught him replacing a light bulb in the stairwell. Tom, mid-50s, shoulders sloped from years of shrugging. 4C? He said, squinting. That place? No one's been in there for months, leased but empty. Some mix-up with the paperwork. I nodded. There's a light on at night. He frowned. Shouldn't be any power in there. That night I tried to sleep with the blinds closed, lights off, earplugs in. But even through my eyelids, I saw the red pulse painting the inside of my apartment, faint and steady, bleeding through the door frame like a slow alarm. At 3:12 Curiosity 1, I stepped into the hallway, bare feet cold against the tile. The air smelled of dust and something faintly sweet, like fruit left too long on a counter. The light flickered once as I approached 4C. I knocked. Nothing. The door creaked open half an inch. Inside, the air was colder. A fine coat of dust muted everything. The floor, the furniture, the air itself. White sheets covered the shapes of a couch, a chair, a table. It looked like a room waiting for a memory to return. In the middle stood a single lamp, small, old-fashioned, its cord trailing across the floor and ending in nothing. It wasn't plugged in, yet it glowed, red, slow, pulse. Each flash lit something new on the walls, photographs pinned in uneven lines. I stepped closer. They were all of my apartment, my kitchen, my hallway, my bed. Some from angles I couldn't explain, as if taken from the ceiling or through walls. My stomach turned cold. The lamp blinked faster. A breath, soft and wet, broke the silence behind me. "Do you like the light?" The voice was low, calm, too close. I didn't look. I ran. The door to 4B slammed shut behind me. I locked every bolt, dragged a chair against it, turned off all my lights. At 3:12, the red glow returned, this time leaking under my door. It pulsed once, then twice. I sat there until the sun came up, the light finally gone, the building silent. When I opened the door the next morning, police tape crisscrossed 4C. A detective stood there, bored expression, coffee in hand. "Building inspection," he said. "Stay in your unit, please." I nodded. Later that afternoon, Tom knocked. "They sealed it," he said. "Tenant vanished months ago." I told him about the lamp. He frowned. We cut the power to that unit last year. That night, I couldn't help myself. I stared at my ceiling until my eyes burned. 3:12 came. The red light blinked once inside my apartment. I tore the plug from the wall, but it kept glowing, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. And underneath it all, faint and steady, came breathing. Slow, deep, in the dark. The breathing didn't stop when the light faded. It only grew quieter, like someone trying not to be heard. I sat on the edge of the bed, afraid to move, afraid that stillness might sound like listening. The air smelled faintly of dust and iron, the scent that comes before a storm or after blood dries. Morning arrived thin and colorless. I made coffee but couldn't drink it. The water looked pink in the mug. I told myself it was reflection from the neon sign across the street, though the sign hadn't worked since I moved in. By noon, I convinced myself to go to work. Normal things anchor you, that's what people say. I locked the door twice, walked down 4 flights of stairs and stepped into air that felt too warm for October. The world outside was painfully ordinary. Buses, sirens, people. But every reflective surface, a car window, a storefront, seemed to blink faintly red when I passed. That night I taped the edges of my door with black duct tape. I turned off my phone, unplugged everything. The apartment hummed anyway, a low vibration under the floorboards. At 3:12 I opened my eyes. The light was already on. It came from the wall opposite my bed this time, bleeding out through hairline cracks in the plaster. Each pulse lit the room in brief stutters, freezing my shadow mid-breath. I whispered to no one, "Stop." The light hesitated, as if considering, then pulsed once more. I approached the wall. The plaster was warm beneath my hand. A faint hum shivered through it, deep as electricity but slower, steadier. I pressed my ear to it and heard the same breathing, followed by a faint rustle, the sound of someone adjusting a camera. My throat went dry. I backed away, stumbled into the kitchen, turned on every light. The bulbs flickered in the same rhythm as the pulse. I called Tom, the superintendent. The line rang until the machine picked up. His recorded voice was drowned under static, but one sentence came through clear. "You shouldn't have gone in there." When I hung up, the hallway light outside my apartment blinked twice and died. I stayed awake until sunrise. The next day I found an envelope wedged under my door. Inside were photographs, grainy, printed on cheap paper. Everyone was of me standing somewhere in my own apartment, cooking, brushing my teeth, sleeping. Each image had a faint red tint, as though developed in darkroom light. The last photo showed me at that exact moment, standing at the counter, envelope in hand. The shot was taken from the window behind me. I turned around. The glass reflected nothing but the room, but on the sill lay a small lamp, the same one from 4C. The first night in Willow Heights was quieter than I expected. No traffic, no distant TV hum, not even the usual city murmur that seeps through cracks in the walls of old buildings. Just the faint hiss of air drifting through the vents and the occasional pop of wood settling somewhere above me. The landlord had warned me as he handed over the keys. "Walls here are thin. Be respectful of privacy." I thought he meant noise. The apartment itself wasn't terrible. A one-bedroom with faded wallpaper, scuffed wooden floors, and that strange sweetness that always hangs around old places. Dust and cinnamon, like someone once baked too much and never opened a window. The vents hummed all night, a soft metallic breath that kept me company as I unpacked. For the first few weeks, everything felt normal, quiet, predictable. Then came the clicking. It started small, a sharp mechanical tick that echoed faintly through the dark. At first I thought it was pipes or maybe the ceiling fan shifting against old wiring, but when I turned off the lights it came again. Click, then silence. Another click, sharper this time. It was faint but rhythmic, too deliberate to be random. When I traced the sound, it led me to the vent above the couch, a narrow rectangle of metal grillwork humming faintly with cold air. I dragged a chair beneath it, climbed up, and pressed my ear against the slats. Nothing. Then, just as I started to pull away, another click, right in my ear. I jerked back so hard I nearly fell. Something glinted behind the metal. A pinpoint of reflection, small and round. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and aimed it through the slats. There, deep inside the ductwork, was a tiny black circle, a lens. I stared until my vision blurred. The realization came slow, spreading like nausea. A camera. Someone had put a camera in my vent. The air coming through it was warm, faintly metallic, and when I leaned close, I could smell something electrical, dust burning off hot wires. The camera was still running. I could almost feel it watching me. My hands were shaking when I called the landlord. He answered on the second ring. "There's something in my vent," I said. "A camera. Someone's..." He sighed before I could finish. "Don't touch it." "What?" "Just leave it. Maintenance will handle it." "When?" "Soon," he said. "Just don't touch it." The line went dead. I stood on the chair for another minute, staring at the faint red light inside the vent until it blinked once and went dark. The next 3 nights were silent. I almost convinced myself it had been taken care of. Then, on the 4th night, the clicking returned. Click, click, click. 3 in a row, like someone taking pictures. My phone buzzed at 2:14 a.m., unknown number. I opened the message. "Nice pajamas." My heart stopped. I was wearing an old gray t-shirt and flannel shorts, the kind I hadn't worn in years. I jumped off the couch and ran to the door. The locks were still bolted. The chain was secure. I turned on every light and checked the windows, each one sealed shut. But the clicking kept going. Click, click. I dragged the couch under the vent and sat there with the lights on, knees pulled to my chest, staring up until sunrise. In the morning, my phone buzzed again. Another message. "You move when you sleep." No punctuation, no name. Just those words. I didn't reply. When I got home from work that day, the door was unlocked. Everything else looked untouched. My keys still on the counter, dishes stacked in the sink, except for one thing. Taped to the ceiling above the couch was a photo of me, asleep, the vent visible just above my head. The angle was perfect. I tore it down, shaking so hard the tape ripped paint from the ceiling. I called the landlord again. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. I walked to the office on the 1st floor, the one with the dusty glass door and the brass number 101 stenciled on it. The blinds were drawn. I knocked anyway. No response. Through the slats, I could see dust floating in a beam of weak sunlight. Desks covered in papers. A coffee mug tipped over, long dried. The door wasn't locked. Inside, it smelled like mildew and printer ink. The desk drawers were empty except for one, the bottom one stuffed with old lease papers. I picked one up. The name on it made my stomach twist. Eli Morris. The same name signed at the bottom of my own lease. The same name that had sent me the text. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. "Why are you in my office?" I dropped the phone. The air in the room felt thick, heavy with something I couldn't name. I backed out slowly, heart pounding. The hallway outside was silent, but I could hear the faint hum of air moving through the building again, a constant low vibration coming from every vent. By the time I reached my apartment door, I could smell cinnamon again. Stronger this time, cloying, almost sickly. I checked the vent above the couch. The red light was back. That night, I couldn't bring myself to sleep. Every creak felt amplified, every whisper of air like breathing. Around 3 a.m., I realized the clicking had stopped again. Relief washed over me like warm water. I even laughed a little. Then I heard a new sound, a faint metallic scrape, something shifting inside the ductwork. I climbed onto the couch, flashlight in hand. The vent cover was slightly bent now, one corner pulled loose. As I leaned closer, I felt a faint pulse of air brush against my face, warm, rhythmic, breathing. I aimed the flashlight inside. The camera was gone. In its place, deeper in the dark, a shape glimmered wetly. An eye, blinking once. I fell backward off the couch, the flashlight rolling under the coffee table. The clicking started again, louder this time, echoing from every vent in the apartment. I crawled toward the door, heart hammering, and grabbed my phone. The screen lit up with a new text. "Don't leave. It's your turn now." The room went black. Every light, every hum, every sound stopped. The silence was absolute. Then, just above me, the vent opened with a slow metallic groan. Something heavy shifted inside, and I heard a voice, low, calm, too close, smile, click. For a long time after that click, I couldn't move. It felt like the air had thickened, pressing down on me, every sound from outside swallowed by the weight of silence. I stared up at the open vent. Nothing came out, but I could feel it watching me from the dark. My phone buzzed again, the screen lighting up the room in pale blue. A new photo. Me. On the floor, looking up at the vent. The timestamp read 2:37 a.m. I threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and slid under the table. When I crawled over to get it, the flashlight beam cut across the carpet, a small trail of dust, fine as ash, falling from the vent above. Something had moved. The voice came again, softer, closer. "Smile for me." I bolted for the door, unlatched it, and yanked it open. The hallway was empty, the fluorescent light overhead flickering on and off. Every other door was closed, silent. But the hum, that faint mechanical whir, followed me, whispering through the air ducts that lined the ceiling. I ran down the hall and slammed my fist against the stairwell door. Locked, the knob wouldn't turn. Behind me, the vent grill over apartment 3A rattled once, then another one, farther down. Each vent along the hall groaned open, one by one, the sound rolling toward me like footsteps in metal. Click, click, click. Every flash was faster now, too quick to be random. Each click lit the corridor for half a heartbeat, white bursts freezing me in fragments of motion, hands half raised, eyes wide. I didn't scream. I don't know why. I think I was afraid of giving it something else to capture. The light at the end of the hall flickered, and I saw someone standing there. A silhouette. Still, tall enough to brush the vent above him. He raised something to his face. Click. I turned and ran the other way. The hallway looped. I swear it wasn't supposed to. I'd walked it dozens of times. But the doors just kept repeating. 3A, 3B, 3C, over and over. My chest tightened, breath ragged. The smell of cinnamon grew stronger, clinging to my skin. When I looked back, the silhouette was gone. The clicking stopped. I stood there shaking, trying to catch my breath. Then a vent above me sighed open. A small piece of paper fluttered out and landed at my feet. I bent down. It was a photograph. Black and white. Me again, running down the same hallway I was standing in. But in the photo, someone was right behind me. I dropped it and sprinted toward the stairwell again. This time, the door opened easily, like it had never been locked. The stairwell was dark, the only light coming from below, faint and orange. I took the steps two at a time, barefoot, heart hammering in my ears. When I reached the lobby, I froze. The office door was open, the one with the brass number 101. Light spilled from inside, a flickering bulb swinging from the ceiling, shadows jumping across the walls. I stepped inside. The desks were gone. The floor was covered in photographs, hundreds of them, overlapping like scales. All of me, sitting, sleeping, eating. Every moment I'd lived in that apartment captured in grainy monochrome. Each image slightly different, like someone had been watching me frame by frame. In the center of the room sat a tripod. On it, a camera, Not a security camera. A real one. Black, heavy, old-fashioned. The lens was pointed at me. I could hear the motor inside, faintly humming. Then it spoke. The same voice I'd heard through the vent. Smile. Click. The flash burned white. I stumbled back, blinded, knocking over a stack of photos. When my vision cleared, the room was empty. No camera, no light, only the smell of burnt film. I turned and ran out of the building. The air outside was cold and clean, the dawn just starting to gray the horizon. I didn't stop until I reached the corner. When I looked back, every window in Willow Heights was glowing red. I called the police. They searched the building for hours, found nothing but dust and wiring. No camera, no photographs, no sign anyone else had been living there. They told me maybe it was a prank, maybe exhaustion, maybe too much stress. But one of the officers, a woman with tired eyes, lingered as the others packed up. She asked quietly, "You said you saw a name on your lease?" "Yeah, Eli Morris." She hesitated. "There's no one by that name in city records, but there was, years ago. He owned Willow Heights." I frowned. "Owned?" She nodded. "He was arrested. Hidden cameras, tenants. Some kind of obsession. They said he recorded everything." I felt my stomach turn. "What happened to him?" "He hung himself in one of the apartments before trial." She glanced up toward the building. Unit 2B, I think. My apartment. I moved out that day, left everything behind. Clothes, furniture, phone. The new place is smaller, cleaner, quieter. No vents on the walls, just open windows. I don't even hang pictures anymore. But sometimes late at night I hear it. A faint click from somewhere behind me. Soft, careful, and the air smells like cinnamon again. Last week a letter arrived. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. Me, sleeping. A red dot glowing faintly in the corner of the frame. On the back, written in shaky ink, "Your turn." Click. The day I moved into Brookline Court, the wind carried the smell of old rain through the open windows. The building sat at the end of a narrow street that never seemed to dry, its bricks dark with age and the faint trace of smoke that the air never lost. My apartment was small, one bedroom, creaking radiator, windows facing another building close enough that you could have passed a cigarette between them if you were bold enough to lean out far. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The landlord called it a city view. In truth, it was the wall of the next building, lined with windows that matched mine perfectly, like facing a mirror that breathed. I unpacked slowly, turning the silence into something I could live with. The refrigerator hummed in uneven bursts, the pipes rattled each time the upstairs unit flushed, and the wooden floor sighed when the wind shifted. Small noises that made an old building feel alive. That first night, I sat by the window with a cheap beer, watching the glow from apartments across the way. Curtains half drawn, televisions flashing, shadows moving. It was strangely comforting, proof of other people existing, living parallel lives just a few yards away. Then I saw him, third window from the left. Standing still, lights off, only his outline visible against the faint reflection of the city behind him. I assumed he was looking outside like I was, one insomniac to another. But the longer I watched, the more certain I became that he wasn't looking out. He was looking in, at me. I laughed under my breath. Paranoia is easy when you're new somewhere. I turned off my own light and watched again, expecting his shape to fade when the glare disappeared. It didn't. He stayed there, motionless, head tilted, like someone listening. When I woke the next morning, sunlight made everything harmless. The opposite window was just glass reflecting the sky. A week passed. I settled into the rhythm of work and the lonely rituals that come after a breakup. frozen dinners, late-night calls to no one, lists of reasons to stay busy. Every night I noticed him again. Same window, same posture. Sometimes I caught myself staring longer than I meant to, waiting for him to move. He never did. One Friday, curiosity won. I leaned out my window and tried to see which unit he occupied. The brass number beside it was too tarnished to read. Someone had taped paper over the mail slot on his door downstairs, but the name had faded to gray smudges. That should have been the end of it. 2 nights later, the power went out. The city dropped into blackness. Streetlights dead, neon gone. My phone light cut through the dark, just enough to show the reflection of my face in the window. Then behind it, another face. Pale, unmoving. The man in the opposite building was still there. No lights, no reflection to blame. His skin seemed to hold its own faint glow, a soft shimmer that made the glass between us disappear. I couldn't see his eyes, but I felt them, like cold fingertips pressed against my chest. I stumbled back, heart racing. The lights returned in a flood, washing the shape away. I closed the curtains and didn't open them again that night. When morning came, a note was taped to my window. Don't close them again. The handwriting was thin, deliberate, written backward on the glass so I could read it from inside. I checked the fire escape, thinking maybe someone had climbed up as a joke, but the metal was coated in rust. Dust undisturbed. No footprints on the sill. I went downstairs and found Marcus, the security guard, drinking coffee at the lobby desk. "There's a guy across from me," I said. "Keeps watching my window." He frowned, flipping through a small logbook. "Across the courtyard?" "Yeah. 3rd window from the left." He shook his head. "That unit burned last year. Nobody moved back in. They're still sorting the insurance." He offered to check, though his tone said he didn't believe me. We went up together, his keys clinking softly. The hall smelled like char and damp plaster. The door opposite my window bore black scorch marks around the frame. Marcus unlocked it. The hinges screamed. Inside, emptiness. Soot on the walls, a single chair melted to its metal bones, dust thick enough to blur the floor. No footprints, no sign of anyone living there. He closed the door and gave me a look halfway between pity and warning. Old buildings play tricks. Light bounces strange. Back in my apartment, I tried to believe him. That night, rain traced thin silver lines down the glass. I kept the curtains shut, but I could feel the other window waiting beyond them. At 2:09 a.m., thunder cracked. The lights flickered. When I finally dared to look, the glass was fogged from the inside, words written backward so I could read them. "You look just like her." I wiped the steam away, heart hammering, but the letters remained, etched into the surface. I moved away from the window and spent the rest of the night sitting on the kitchen floor with the lights on. Morning brought sunlight, warmth, and the illusion of safety. I convinced myself it was vandalism, a leftover mark from whoever had lived there before the fire. Still, I taped cardboard over the window. 2 days passed. No light, no messages. I started to breathe normally again. Then, Sunday evening, as I was washing dishes, a sound like glass cracking echoed through the apartment. The window. The cardboard fluttered as I approached. Behind it, a single spiderweb fracture spread across the pane. The break came from the inside. I peeled the tape away slowly. Through the crack, the opposite window stared back, intact, spotless, reflecting nothing. Something moved behind it, slow as water under ice. I stepped closer, trying to make out the shape. It tilted its head the same way the man used to. The glass in front of me vibrated once, sharp enough to sting my fingertips. Across the way, the window fogged again. Letters appeared, backward, uneven. "Why did you leave me?" I stumbled away, knocking a glass off the counter. It shattered, the sound small and bright against the thick silence. I didn't sleep that night. Each time I started to drift, the faint rasp of breathing came from the direction of the window. slow, deliberate, matching mine until I couldn't tell which was which. By morning, I decided to move. The landlord didn't argue. "Lease is flexible," he said, though he wouldn't meet my eyes. Brookline courts had incidents. When I asked what kind, he only said, "You should have faced the street." That evening I started packing. Outside, the sunset hit the windows opposite mine, turning them blood orange. For a moment I saw the faint shape of a woman behind the glass. Hair long, posture tense, face blurred by light. She looked so much like the outline I'd seen before that my hands went cold. Then the reflection shifted, and she was gone. I told myself it was the sun, the tricks of mirrored glass, until I turned off my lamp and saw her again. She was closer this time, not in the opposite window, but inside its reflection, standing just behind me. The air turned thick. My breath fogged the glass. On the other side, a fingertip traced along the same line of steam, matching my movement exactly. I stood frozen, one hand against the cold glass. The shape in the reflection didn't move until I did. When I stepped back, it stepped closer. The line of its fingertip lingered in the fog, a perfect mirror. I whispered, "Who are you?" But the word dissolved against the window pane. The glass answered with a faint tapping, like nails on the other side of a coffin. The tapping followed me to bed that night. I left the lights on, blinds drawn tight, television flickering without sound. I must have dozed for a moment because I woke to darkness and the soft sound of breathing right beside the window. I could see it through the thin fabric of the curtain, a pale outline, neither tall nor short, just wrong in the way it filled the space. The curtain brushed inward once, as though touched from outside. The building was 3 stories up. There was no ledge. I didn't open the window. I sat on the floor until sunrise, eyes burning, waiting for the shape to fade. When morning came, the curtain hung still, no footprints on the sill. But in the center of the glass, a new message had appeared, written backward in thin streaks of ash. "Look closer." I did. For a second, the reflection made sense. My room, my lamp, my face. Then the angle shifted, and behind my own reflection was the man again. The one from before, features pale and stretched, standing exactly where I stood. His mouth opened as if to speak, but the sound came from inside my apartment. "Why did you close them?" I stumbled backward, knocking over the lamp. The bulb burst, and darkness swallowed the room. In the brief afterglow, I saw his hand pressed against the other side of the window, palm to palm with mine. The skin was too smooth, the fingers too long. The smell of smoke filled the air. I ran, down the hall, through the stairwell that reeked of burnt paint, to the lobby where Marcus usually sat. The chair was empty, the coffee cup overturned, steam still rising from it. I called out. My voice echoed against the tiled walls, hollow, unanswered. When I looked up, every security monitor behind the desk showed the same image, my apartment window. The curtains were open. A figure stood inside. I left the building. The cold hit me like water. I walked until my legs ached, until I couldn't see Brookline Court behind me. I found a small cafe that opened at dawn and stayed there until the world felt solid again. By noon, I convinced myself I'd had a breakdown, stress, isolation, insomnia, old trauma wearing a new mask. I returned that afternoon to pack what was left. The hallway smelled of wet ashes. My door was ajar. Inside, everything was as I'd left it, except the window. The glass was shattered outward, shards littering the floor. Cold air rushed through the empty frame. Across the courtyard, the burned-out unit stared back, empty and black. But something flickered deep inside it, a faint orange glow, like firelight behind thick smoke. I took one step closer, drawn without meaning to be. For an instant, I saw her clearly. A woman, skin pale, hair matted with soot, eyes fixed on mine. She lifted a hand as if to touch the glass. Behind her, a shadow moved, taller, thinner. The man. He leaned forward until his face filled the window. His lips moved soundlessly, shaping words I couldn't hear. The glow behind them brightened, turning their outlines to silhouettes. The air around me grew hot, dry, metallic. Then the light went out. Only my own reflection remained. I left that day. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. The landlord kept my deposit without argument. He didn't ask why. It's been 3 weeks. I found another apartment across town. Smaller, basement level, no view. The windows face a brick wall. I thought that would help. But last night, while I was brushing my teeth, I noticed the faint glimmer of light reflected in the mirror. Red, rhythmic, coming from the bathroom window I'd covered with cardboard. I pulled the tape free. Through the slit, I saw a window across the narrow gap of alley. Too close, too familiar. A pale face watched from the other side. It smiled. The letters began to form on the glass, backward, one by one, as if traced by invisible fingers. You moved. My hand shook so badly the toothbrush fell into the sink. I turned off the light, hoping darkness would erase it. It didn't. The words glowed faintly in the dark, the spaces between them breathing like open mouths. I backed into the hall. The air smelled of rain and smoke. From the other side of the window, a whisper came, soft enough to slip under the door. "Don't close them again." I haven't slept since. Every few hours, the reflection shifts. Sometimes it's the man, sometimes the woman, sometimes both, standing behind me in the glass. And when the wind moves just right, the curtains sway though the windows are sealed, and I hear it again, slow, steady breathing, filling the space between my walls and theirs. It sounds closer every night. The first night I slept in Maple Terrace, I woke up to the sound of footsteps above my bed. Soft, steady, and too slow to be a neighbor walking to the kitchen or bathroom. They circled once, paused, then started again. 10 steps, always 10. The ceiling creaked with each one. The rhythm so deliberate I found myself counting under my breath like a lullaby I didn't want. When I moved in, the landlord had smiled too wide when handing me the keys. "Old building," he said. "Ceilings like to talk." I thought he meant pipes, water, settling beams. But pipes don't breathe. The apartment smelled faintly of dust and citrus cleaner, the kind that tries too hard to hide something sour underneath. The windows rattled when the wind hit right, and the walls were thin enough that I could hear Mrs. Heller downstairs humming along to old radio shows. It felt lived in, comfortable even. Until midnight. That first week, I told myself it was the weather. Temperature shifts, wood expanding, but the pattern was too precise. Always at 12:14 a.m., always 10 steps, then a pause. By the fourth night, I couldn't stand it anymore. I lay staring at the ceiling, tracking every sound like a heartbeat I couldn't turn off. Then, on impulse, I grabbed the broom from the corner and knocked 3 times on the ceiling. The sound stopped. For a full 10 seconds, nothing. Then came 2 sharp knocks in return. I froze, broom handle still in my hand. The silence after that felt heavier than noise ever could. Then something scraped across the floor above me, long, drawn out, like a chair dragging slowly across wood. I dropped the broom, didn't sleep after that. The next morning, I caught Mrs. Heller by the mailboxes. She was in her 60s, hair white and thin, eyes soft behind thick glasses. "Do you know who lives above me?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She frowned. "Above you?" "Yeah, 3C, right?" Her lips pressed tight. "Honey, you're the top floor." I laughed, but she didn't. "Must be the pipes," I said finally. She nodded too quickly. "Old building," she murmured, walking away. That night, I left the hallway light on. The glow leaked under my door in a thin golden line, and for a while I thought it would be enough to make me feel safe. At midnight, the footsteps returned. 10 steps. Pause. 10 more. I pulled the blanket to my chin, heart hammering. Then the steps stopped, right above my bed. Dust drifted down, tiny motes swirling in the faint light from the window. The air changed, warmer somehow, thicker. I could hear it now. Breathing, slow, wet, rhythmic. I held my breath, every muscle locking. Then, from directly above me, a whisper. "Don't look up." I did anyway. The ceiling wasn't just creaking anymore, it was moving. A long crack stretched across the plaster, widening 1 slow inch at a time. Dust rained down like ash. I stumbled out of bed, grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight. The beam caught the smallest hole, a perfect, deliberate circle cut clean through the plaster. Inside it, 2 eyes stared back, not blinking, not shifting, just watching. I screamed and fell backward, the phone clattering to the floor. When I scrambled up again, the hole was gone. Not patched, gone, like it had never existed. I left the lights on until dawn. When morning came, a note was waiting under my door. Neat handwriting, black ink, the paper stiff like it had been folded and unfolded too many times. "You weren't supposed to see me yet." The handwriting looked careful, practiced. I turned the paper over, expecting something else, a signature, a threat, a clue, but the back was blank. I called the landlord. He didn't answer. When I went to the office downstairs, the blinds were closed. The open sign flipped backward. The silence inside was total. Through the glass, I could see his desk. A single cup of coffee sat on the corner, half empty, long since gone cold. I went back upstairs. That night I tried to convince myself it had been a trick of light, that the eyes had been my reflection, warped by the cracked plaster. I turned the lights off at midnight and waited. 10 steps. Pause. 10 more. But this time the sound wasn't directly above. It moved, across the ceiling, over the hall, then stopped above the bathroom. The pipes rattled once. A soft knock came from the wall, then another, and then, from the vent above the shower, a slow exhale of air, like someone sighing through their teeth. I backed out, turned on every light again, and left the TV blaring static just to fill the silence. I don't remember falling asleep, but I remember waking up. The TV was off, and something was standing at the foot of the bed. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The dark felt thicker there, like it had shape. I reached for my phone with shaking hands, turned the flashlight on, and aimed it forward. Nothing, just the empty space between the bed and the wall. But the dust on the floor was disturbed. Faint footprints leading from the door to where the shadow had been. Small prints, barefoot. I sat up all night, staring at the ceiling. When morning came, I found another note under the door. Almost time. No handwriting this time, just words printed in block letters, too clean to be written by hand. My stomach turned. I packed a bag, grabbed my phone, and walked to the building across the street. There's a cafe there, warm, bright, full of people who didn't know what was crawling through my ceiling. I stayed until they closed, then sat on the curb outside until sunrise. When I finally went back inside, the hallway lights were out. The air smelled like dust and rain. At my door, a faint hum buzzed in the silence, like electricity running through the walls. I reached for the knob and froze. A single, deliberate knock came from the other side. Once. Then silence. I waited. Nothing. Finally, I turned the key and pushed the door open. The apartment was dark except for a thin beam of light falling through the crack in the curtains. Dust hung thick in the air, and in the center of the room, directly under the light, something new had appeared. A chair, old wood, carved legs, perfectly centered. Right below the spot in the ceiling where the footsteps always started. The chair hadn't been there when I left. I would have noticed. There was no mistaking it. It was old, carved from dark wood, the kind that creaks even when you look at it. I approached slowly, the floor cold under my bare feet, every breath loud in my ears. The air beneath the ceiling felt warmer, heavier, like someone else's breath mixed with mine. Dust spiraled lazily down through the shaft of light and landed on the seat of the chair. I whispered, "Who put this here?" The silence pressed back against me, thick and living. Then, softly above me, footsteps, 10 steps, pause, 10 more. I stepped closer to the chair, tilting my head up. The ceiling groaned and a fine crack appeared running right above where the chair stood, as if something behind the plaster had shifted closer to the surface. I took another step back. The wood creaked under my heel, echoing through the room like a reply. Then, quietly, the whisper came again. "Don't look up." It was lower this time, closer. I couldn't help myself. I looked anyway. The crack widened. A thin line of dust spilled down, and behind it, movement. Not fast, not human. Just a slow, heavy ripple through the ceiling, like something inside was pushing against it. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam caught a faint depression above the chair, as if hands were pressing out from the inside. Then the voice again, softer, trembling almost like laughter. "You're early." I stumbled backward, my shoulder hitting the wall. The footsteps started again, circling, faster this time, right above the bed. Dust rained down in a steady stream. The air was thick with it, dry and hot. I bolted for the door, fumbling with the lock. It didn't turn. My keys slipped from my fingers and clattered to the floor. I twisted the handle again, harder. Nothing. Behind me, the ceiling let out a long, drawn-out groan. The plaster bulged, swelling downward like something inside was taking a breath. Then a single voice, almost gentle. "Sit down." The chair creaked once. I froze. The bulge in the ceiling pulsed again, and a sound followed, wet, slow, like fingers dragging through thick paint. I turned and ran to the window, shoved the curtain aside. The glass was fogged from the inside, the words scrawled across it in broad, uneven letters. "Look up." I didn't want to, but my head moved on its own. The ceiling had split open. A long tear ran across it, plaster dangling in curls. Between them, a face looked down. White skin stretched thin, eyes wide and pale, mouth open in something that could have been a smile or a scream. I fell backward, hitting the dresser. The lamp toppled and smashed. The room went dark. Then I heard it crawl. Not walk. Crawl. Fingers digging into the edges of the hole, nails tearing through plaster, the sound of joints bending wrong. I scrambled for the door again, pounding on it, yelling for help. From the other side came 3 knocks. Slow. Deliberate. Then a voice. My landlord's voice. "Everything okay in there?" "Yes, please help, someone. Something's..." The door handle turned, and the moment it clicked, the noise above me stopped. The air went still. He opened the door halfway, his face pale, eyes wide. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said. I pointed at the ceiling, shaking. "It's up there, something's..." The words died in my throat. The ceiling was whole again, smooth, untouched. No cracks, no dust, just silence. He stared for a moment, then sighed. "Old buildings make strange sounds," he said. "You should get some rest." I wanted to argue, to scream, to make him see what I'd seen, but my throat closed up. He closed the door behind him, and his footsteps faded down the hall. I sat on the floor for what felt like hours, until my breathing slowed and the room settled back into that same too heavy quiet. At some point, I must have dozed off. When I woke, the sunlight was cutting through the blinds. Everything looked ordinary again, except for one thing. The chair was gone. In its place on the floor lay a single slip of paper. "Tonight." That was all it said. I packed a bag and left. I didn't lock the door. I told myself I'd never come back, that I'd find somewhere else, anywhere else. But that night, when I checked into a motel across town, I heard it again. 10 steps, pause, 10 more. Above me. I looked at the ceiling. The plaster was cracked, just slightly. I told myself it was nothing, that my mind was replaying old sounds. Then faintly, dust fell onto the pillow beside me. Warm dust. The light flickered once, twice, then steadied. And just before I could convince myself it was all in my head, a voice whispered through the vent above the bed. "You weren't supposed to leave yet." I froze, eyes locked on the ceiling. A line of fresh dust fell between my hands. Then, one last time, the whisper, closer now, almost touching my ear. "Don't look up." The ceiling creaked. Warm air brushed my cheek, and something small landed on the blanket, light as ash, soft as breath. I didn't dare move, because it wasn't dust this time. It was a fingertip,